Well, good morning, everybody, and warm welcome to Vinnova. And today we're going to focus on collaboration between Sweden and France. My name is Joachim Appelqvist. I'm the Deputy Director General here at Vinnova, also responsible for the Division for International Collaboration. So the background of today's meeting is, of course, the Strategic Innovation Partnership between Sweden and France. It was signed by the prime ministers of both countries back in 2017, and it was reconfirmed in June now. And of course, if you look at the agreement, it's quite obvious that there should be an innovation partnership between Sweden and France, because these are two countries that really recognizing the importance of innovation as a way of creating solutions to societal challenges, and that is really the foundation of the agreement, and we'll hear much more about it from people representing the embassy and also the people that are working with implementing the agreement here at Vinnova today. But agreements is one thing, and doing the work to securing that there is collaboration happening in the real world is another. And that is the theme of today, really giving information on the possibilities of funding to create projects that can really deliver on the agreement signed by the prime ministers. So I'm really happy to see you all in this room, because you're the ones doing all the work. And I'm especially happy to have my Mbaye here, representing our partner, not in crime, but in delivering this agreement from BPI France. So I'm really happy that you're here and giving the French perspective on the funding possibilities. So once again, warmly welcome to this information event. And now I will give the mic to Natasha Palm, who is the coordinator for the Swedish-French innovation collaboration here at Vinnova. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Joachim, and welcome everyone. I would also like to welcome our web audience. We are actually live streaming this event to make it available to as many as possible, and it will also be available as a movie on YouTube afterwards, so you can feel free to distribute it and spread it to whoever wants to see. And hopefully we have through the web both French and Swedish audience as well. A little bit why you are here today. Joachim tapped into that. It's really just to make sure that we inform you about this joint call that we are now having between France and Sweden, between BPI France and Vinnova, the call on smart mobility. And also, like Yurika pointed out, it's a part of the French-Swedish innovation partnership, which we will talk about a little bit more soon. And you are the target group for this call. It's actually you who we have invited here, who we believe that you should be the partner in one of the projects applying for this funding. And what do we want to achieve? And after this meeting, we really hope that we will see some strong consortia, and that this will only be start of a really long-term relationship that will continue to collaborate even after and beyond this call. We are having this meeting at Vinnova to inform and also to give some information about potential projects, about potential companies, in order to facilitate the building of consortia and to really get good applications and good projects. So this is one of the events, and we will also have a similar event in France, in Paris, at BPI France on 24th of September. And to even deepen this even further, there will be a workshop in the afternoon, which I think most of you, all of you have been invited to, but we will give more information on that during the meeting. We have also an agenda, which I hope you got a copy of at reception. Otherwise, let one of my colleagues with green tags know, and we will get you one. First part of the meeting before coffee break will focus on the informational part, on partnership, on a joint call, and the second part will focus more on project proposals and the company presentations. And we will end with a lunch and mingle at 12 o'clock. A few words about Swedish-French partnership. In November of 2017, the Prime Minister Stefan Löfven, Prime Minister of Sweden, and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, they met and entered into strategic partnership for innovation, digital transformation, and transition to green and sustainable solutions. And this partnership aimed to develop closer ties in the several areas, and it was sustainable cities, green mobility solutions, sustainable digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and several others. And in June this year, the Prime Minister and President, they met again, and they decided to deepen this partnership, and particularly in the area of sustainable development in artificial intelligence, 5G, and fossil-free transport sector. And they also specified the shared goal to achieve inclusive and climate-neutral cities by 2030. So the purpose of this French and Swedish partnership is really to work together and through innovation to address the challenges of the transition to a more sustainable and inclusive society. And the cooperation is supposed to happen through involvement of industry, startups, academia, and the public sector. Smart mobility, which is the focus for today, is the area that drives several of these topics, both when it comes to transport, to artificial intelligence, to climate-neutral cities, and so on. And we are very, very pleased to and honored to have this French-Swedish call today and to be doing it together with our colleagues from France, from BPI France. And we recognize that this collaboration between Sweden and France is, in this joint call is just the start of a long-term, hopefully successful and fruitful journey. And with that, to just give even further perspective on the partnership, I would like to welcome Sandrine Testas from the Embassy of France in Stockholm. Welcome.
Thank you, Natasha. First of all, I'm very glad to be here today. As Natasha said, it's like a concretization of our partnership today, as this is the first call for a very important topic, which is smart mobility. The French-Swedish partnership involves collaboration in different fields, smart cities, smart mobilities, health also, green finance. It has to be mentioned. And it encompasses and includes also tools like research infrastructures, digitalization, and artificial intelligence, which are some key technologies that gives means for you, universities, research companies, research organizations, to tackle with the challenges we are facing now, such as climate change, and also the wish for more sustainable, inclusive societies. So maybe I won't take much time to describe what I've already said, but just to mention that I thank you all participants here, Vinova and BP also, for your commitment in this partnership. You participants for your interest and attendance. I'm really eager to listen to all of you about the proposals you may have regarding joint collaboration in order to create some innovative solutions. And I would like also to mention that other meetings are planned in France and in Sweden in the months to come regarding mobility, cities, also health. We are working also on personalized medicine and environmental health. And I know that a lot of things are going on also regarding finance, green finance. Regarding space, which is another important part of the partnership, I think that another bilateral agreement is coming to be signed quite soon. So I think that things are going well now regarding the partnerships. So thank you all.
Thank you, Sandrine. And now the part that I think you really came for is the information on the joint call, and it will be delivered by Lars Nybom from Vinnova and Maël Mbaye from BPI France. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see how this works. Thank you very much, Natasha. My name is Lars Nybom. I represent Vinnova, and together with me I have
Maël Mbaye from BPI France.
Yes. Okay, to start off, we need to describe what Vinnova and BPI do. So Vinnova is the Swedish innovation agency, and our mission is to promote sustainable growth by funding needs-driven research and innovation. And by doing this, also try to develop effective innovation systems. We have 3 roles in the Swedish innovation system. We are one of the main funding agencies when it comes to research and innovation. We are the national contact point for the European framework programs on research and innovation, Horizon 2020. And we are an expert agency to the government when it comes to innovation and innovation policy matters.
So maybe just a quick presentation of what is BPI France. And once again, thank you, Vinnova, for hosting this event. We are really happy to be here today and having the chance to connect with you all here. BPI France stands for the French Public Investment Bank, and today we are the main French agency looking at supporting French companies in their business and innovation development. We have 48 regional offices across the country with more than 2,000 people being there to support the companies, connecting them with the right ecosystem and the right actors in France and worldwide. And basically our goal is to support them from the pre-creation phase until their expansion in other countries. And to do so, we are allocating around 27.3 billion euros every year to businesses. And innovation is, according to us, a very key tool to leverage companies' growth and production activities. So we are really happy to have this call with Sweden, as we believe that collaboration with other key tech companies in Sweden in the field of smart mobility, but as well health and others, are very important for our companies, that we can learn a lot from you, and we believe that we can also provide you with some interesting technologies to help you pursue your goals in terms of sustainable developments.
So if we go to this call that we are presenting right now, what we want to try to do is to leverage what Vinnova does and what BPI France does. We want to try to stimulate increased R&D collaboration between the Swedish and the French actors. We want to explore the synergies, the obvious synergies that we see between the French and the Swedish ecosystem when it comes to this mobility area. We want the projects to start to try to develop and test new project services or methods within the Swedish and the French context. And since this call is quite small in when it comes to funding amount overall, we want to try to stimulate strong and build strong consortiums for future R&D projects within larger schemes. For example, the coming Horizon Europe, or the different Eureka programs, and so on. The scope that we've chosen is quite broad, to be honest, but it is focused on mobility. We call it Innovations for a Digitalized and Automated Transport System. Focus area of the project should be how connected and shared automated vehicles can contribute to a more accessible and sustainable and efficient transport system. Very broad. So when doing a bilateral or multilateral call, you need some kind of a framework. We have chosen, since both Vinnova and BPI France are involved in the Eureka network, this is the lowest hanging fruit, the fastest way for us to do this. The Eureka network is an intergovernmental network of funding agencies, basically, where you quite easily can do bilateral, multilateral calls. My colleague Peter Lindberg will talk more about Eureka later on. Just to give an idea, so in the Eureka network there are a couple of instruments. We have the cluster programs, we have the Eurostars program, we have Global Stars mechanism. For this call we will be using the network projects method, and we will come back to what that actually implies.
So regarding the project requirements, well, 4 main points that you must keep in mind. First of all, we are looking at tech partnerships, not business ones. That means that we're really expecting from both partners to contribute in terms of innovation, to co-create or adapt, improve a new innovative solution. Therefore, we will really look at what you're doing within this partnership in terms of R&D activities and contribution and collaboration with the other partners. Secondly, who is the main target? Well, the main target are companies. Obviously, research centers and universities can also be part of a project. However, our main target is companies, and they must have the lead within the project. And a third point is that we are looking at supporting close-to-market projects. Therefore, the period of the project should not last more than 24 months. And maybe a link to the first point is that there must be a balance, also relationship. We do not want to basically fund subcontracting subcontractors, and therefore the partners must at least take 25% of the global budget of the project. So if you must keep in mind these 3 points, there must be one business from France, one company also from Sweden. The balance budget should be respected. But as Lars mentioned, and Peter will talk more about that, it's not because it's a French-Swedish call that you can't work with Germans or British or Spanish. The Eureka framework allows you to do so. However, they must secure their own funding. Regarding the eligible cost and funding criteria, on the French side, well, the eligible companies are those that are not exceeding 2,000 employees. However, it doesn't mean that the corporates, and maybe there are some here today with us, are not allowed to take part in a project. However, they will not get funding from BPI France, but they could definitely be involved in the project with smaller entities. The eligible costs are also those that are linked to, obviously, industrial research and experimental development. And in terms of funding amounts, on the French side, it will be a repayable advance up to 3 million euros that can cover up to 65% of the project's cost.
Yes, on the Swedish side, we allow basically any type of actor to participate in this project. However, there should be at least, like Miles said, there should be at least one commercial or business on the Swedish side. We have funding levels set to we give 30% of the funding. Since we know it's a research and innovation funding, we give grants. So we give 30% for large companies to be part of this. We give a grant up to 50% for SMEs. And for universities and research institutes, we can give up to 100% of the costs. We have a target of maximum grant per project of 2.5 million Swedish kroners. Yeah. So the timeline of this call, it opened yesterday. And now we are in the information meetings phase. So today is at Vinnova, and in 2 weeks there will be an event at BPI France. The deadline for the application, or the applications, as you will soon discover, will be on the 3rd of December. Then Vinnova and BPI France will do eligibility check of the projects according to the different eligibility criteria in the call text. We will have two independent assessment or project assessment evaluation processes, one in Vinnova and one in BPI France. This will take place in December, January-ish, leading up to a consensus meeting between BPI France and Vinnova on the 7th of February, where we will finalize our funding decision, basically. This will lead up to a notification to the applicants and a labeling, a Eureka labeling of the project. Okay, so the application, how to apply. There will be three points of contact, basically. One will be at Vinnova, and one will be at BPI France, and one will be at the Eureka network. This is not as confusing as it sounds. Since the Swedish participants apply to Vinnova, the Swedish part of the consortium will have to apply to Vinnova, and the French part of the consortium will have to apply to BPI France. With that said, the overall application for the whole project, the international consortium, has to include, first of all, the Eureka project form, which you will be able to download from the Eureka network homepage. There are links in the call text, probably 2 or 3 places where how to get there. This is a quite old school form, but it's necessary for us to do this. So we also have an annex in the call text how to write the application in that form. Then we have we want to see a project plan, and we have another annex in the call text as guidelines. We don't have a form for this. It's up to you, but there are a couple of questions that we want you to answer. Then for simplification, we accept a budget of the project in Excel, because I guess most of you work in Excel when you try to develop these kind of projects. And last but not least is a document with scanned signatures. And this is a part of the Eureka requirement, and the scanned signatures will be the Eureka project form creates this. So here is the call text, the front page of the call text. It's published on Vinnova, and here in this one, read this one before you start writing the application, please. Yes, so this is just to give an idea of the Eureka network homepage. You have the address up there. This is where you download the Eureka application form. This is what it looks. You have a couple of instructions here as well. So after the 3rd of December, so Vinnova and BPI France will close the call simultaneously on December 3rd at 1400 Central European Time. We will perform the eligibility check. We will have 2 independent assessment processes, one by BPI France and one by Vinnova. We will use the Eureka project assessment methodology in order to do these assessments. This is for us to have a common language when we discuss the projects later on. The consensus panel will be held between France and Sweden to agree on the final funding decision. The successful projects, the ones that are chosen here, will later go on to be submitted to Eureka, where the Eureka National Project Coordinator will complete the project assessment methodology in their system. There will be a Eureka labeling and endorsement in February, and notifications to applicants will happen at the same time. All right, a lot of information, so I made this one just to make it easier. The international consortium, right? The Swedish part applies to Vinnova, the French part applies to BPI France. Assessment, some kind of funding panel. Same thing happens in BPI France. We will have the consensus meeting. The successful projects will be submitted to Eureka. Vinnova will fund the Swedish participants. BPI France will fund the French participants.
And maybe just one very important point is that do not hesitate to tell to your French partner and vice versa to get in touch with us before this first step, in order to make sure that your project is really eligible and that fits completely within the program, and that your company is also eligible for funding. Because if not, we can avoid you to write a whole application form for nothing, basically. And if your project is selected, well, then you will get, you will be awarded the Eureka label. So this comes from the Eureka network, as we said, and basically it confirmed that your project has a real added value in terms of R&D, and that represents also a real competitive advantage for both companies that are taking part in this project, and that will lead to a real disruptive product by the end of the project. Last but not least, we also wanted just to mention that we will have a similar event in Paris on September 24th. So please feel free, if you're in Paris, to pass by. It's always nice to have a nice glass of wine in Paris while talking about smart mobility, I think. There will be also some cheese to make sure that we fit with all the clichés. And there will be also a roundtable on smart mobility in France and in Sweden, and one elevator pitch with some French startups working in this field. And afterward, there will be a networking session to make sure that you can connect with some potential actors and submit a project in the coming months. So once again, if you're in Paris, or if you have colleagues or partners over there, Paris or in France, do not hesitate. And we will also stream this event online. And if you have any question,
please contact us.
And thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lars and Mael. Any questions to Lars and Mael? Otherwise, you're just free to contact them on this contact information anytime. Thank you. This was one way to finance French-Swedish collaboration. There are other ways also to receive financing, and my colleague Peter Lindberg and after him Annika Bergendal from Vinnova will inform us about other financing possibilities now. Ta en annan.
Okay, so now you can hear me. So as Lars and Mel mentioned, I mean, we have this joint call for projects, but we are thinking big and we want to leverage this funding. This is offered in the call with other funding possibilities as well. So this is the theme for my presentation, to find parallel or additional funding for project consortia within smart mobility. And I will basically look for this in two places now in my presentation. So I will first discuss a little bit more of other fundings within the Eureka network that you heard about. And then in the end, I will give some ideas about Horizon 2020 and smart mobility. So going back to Eureka network, you have already seen this one once before, but I could just maybe add some additional information. I mean, it's as you understand it, it's a joint network. It's 45 countries, most of them in Europe, as Sweden and France. But we also have a few overseas countries. We have South Korea, we have South Africa, we have Canada, and we have in South America we have Chile and now also Argentina. So there are good possibilities for really global collaboration in this network. And the general theme for all the Eureka instruments is that they are It's about industrial-driven research and innovation, and it should be international project collaboration, at least 2 participants from 2 countries. And as you heard, the funding is on national level and coordinated in a clever way. So, and the call you heard about, it was founded on Eureka network projects. So now I'm going to move on and talk a little bit more about cluster projects and then Eurostars projects. The cluster projects are, well, they are supports cooperation in quite big international consortia. It can be a lot of partners from a lot of countries, but it can also be down to only 2 participants from 2 countries. So there's a wide possibilities to do very different things within a cluster projects. It should be industry driven, and ideally you bring in the whole value chain, all your contacts within the cluster consortium. And this is a very good platform also for supporting collaboration between small and medium-sized enterprises and large corporates. And there's also the bottom-up principle here. It's talk a lot about bottom-up in Eureka, and it really means that you decide what the project is about. It's your idea, and you build the consortium together with your consortium partners to realize this idea, and Eureka supports this. And as always, the projects should be market-oriented. I can also say that many of the cluster projects, they are, even if they are relating to the markets, they are a little bit maybe one step away from the market in a way that they support standardization and also maybe to build a joint technology platform that several partners then can go ahead and further commercialize after the cluster project. So in a way, it's a little bit pre-competitive, and standardization is also part of a cluster project. And as I said, it can vary a lot between 2 and 14 participants, 3 to 4 countries usually. So usually you have small under-national consortia in each country that are working together. Average duration 30 months, and average project cost anything between 1.5 and 15 million euro. And of course there are larger and even smaller projects than this, but this is like some kind of average. And the Eureka clusters that maybe are most relevant to this area, smart mobility, is Celtic Next. It's more related to innovation in ICT, telecom sector, but it's very wide. And smart mobility definitely fits in. There is a call open now that closes on mid-October, and the contact person at Vinnova is Jessica Svennebring. And this is quite soon, but I mean there are usually 2 calls each year, so there might be 1 call in the spring. We don't have any dates yet, but there will definitely be more opportunities in 2020. And then we have ITEA. This is about software-intensive systems in all different application areas, and smart mobility can also build a product there. Corporate outlines are open now and closes on 31st of October. And here you can contact Andreas Alström for more information. And we have some Swedish funding also for the cluster projects, and for small and medium-sized enterprises up to 50%, large companies, corporates up to 30%, and universities, institutes, public sector up to 100%. And then also we have a limitation that maximum 50% of the funding for the total budget of the project. That's the Swedish part of the project. So we have funds 50% of the costs of the Swedish participants. And then I move on to Eurostars. And Eurostars is the Eureka's SME program. So in Eurostars is focused on SME, international collaboration, and a little bit more close to market projects than the cluster projects perhaps. Because in Eurostars, I mean, the target is to have an innovative product, process, or service on the market within 2 years after the end of the project. And also here, it's bottom up. It's your idea. You decide. You build the consortium to realize your product ideas and bring them to market. And it's about international collaboration. You have to be at least 2 partners from 2 countries. And in Eurostars, it's a little bit more the small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs that are in the driving seat. What's special about Eurostars is that an SME has to coordinate the project. And then there are perhaps a little bit extra requirements on that SME. It must be an SME that has research and development capacity in-house, that they actually have staff that work with this. Part of the turnover are used to fund R&D activities in-house in the company. And this is also to secure that the company has the capacity to really run an international R&D project and coordinate the work between international partners. But apart from this R&D performing SME, other companies, small SMEs, large companies, universities, research institutes can take part as project partners. And here we have the typical Eurostars project. It's a little bit smaller than the cluster project. So generally 3 to 4 participants from 2 to 3 countries. Average duration the same, 2.5 years. Average project cost around 1.4 million. And the message here is you don't have to build a big consortium with a lot of partners from several countries to be competitive in the Eurostars call. It's about just have the essential partners that you really need to bring your idea to market. And the Eurostars funding is kind of similar. 50% for the SMEs, 30% to large companies. Universities, institutes, public sector, 70%. It's a little bit lower here because this is a little bit more weighted towards the SMEs since it's an SME program. We have a maximum of 5 million Swedish kronor per project to the Swedish part of the consortium. Next call closes really soon on 12th September, but there's a new opportunity beginning of next year, 13 February on 2020. So, and now just a few words about other possibilities in Horizon 2020. And I should also mention about the Eurostars program that it's run in collaboration with the European Commission. So in a way, it's also part of Horizon 2020, and 25% of the funding comes from the European Commission. But as a project participant, you only have contact in Sweden with Vinnova and in France with BPI France. So that is your partners for the Eurostars funding. But here we have an interesting call in the ICT sector of Horizon 2020. It's about cross-border trials and validation of 5G technologies. And here you can apply for grants, 7 to 10 million euros per project. Total budget for the call is 30 million. Last day to apply is 13th of November. And if you want to learn more about this call, you can contact Lars Gustafsson that is here today. And he will tell you all the details about this opportunity. And then we have Excel, that is another partnership program. It's not like Eurostars, but it's something a bit similar, but not quite. It's run in cooperation with the European Commission, and Excel stands for Electronic Components and Systems for European Leadership. So there we have the focus. So this is a little bit quite close to the Eureka clusters. Similar type of a little larger consortium involving research and industry. What's interesting here is that one of the key application areas is transport and smart mobility. So here's a good opportunity really to find some funding for your sector. The Swedish funding then, well, we have a budget for 50 million Swedish kronor a year at Vinnova for this. And then since it's run in cooperation with the Commission will add 50 million Swedish kronor or similar amount. So there will be 100 million Swedish kronor available for Swedish participants in Excel projects. And I should also mention a matchmaking opportunity or opportunity to pitch project ideas. It's in November, 19th of November in Helsinki. And it's called European Forum for Electronic Components and Systems. So it's possible that if you are a Swedish SME, you can get the travel grant and go there and connect and pitch your product ideas and try to start building a consortium. There will be a call next year for project outlines. It should close around April, May. And if you want to learn more about Excel and how to apply and so on, you can contact another colleague of mine, Andreas Alström, that works also at Vinnova in the ICT department. And here's my final piece of information. This is another Horizon call. It's in this EIC, and it's Europe stands for European Innovation Council. And in this part of Horizon 2020, you also have the SME instrument that might be a little bit more famous. But this is another part of call. Here you also have to have a consortium with participants from industry, research institutes, academia. Should be around 3 to 5 partners, and you have to be at least 3 countries. So there has to be Sweden, France, and someone else. But here there are quite a lot of opportunities. Next call closes on 22nd of October, and then there are additional 3 calls next year. And I bring this up because it's little known, but it's quite interesting. And I think in the last call from May in Sweden, we had like 8 project consortia that applied and 2 got funded. So it's quite good success rate. And what you should know about fast-tracked innovation is that these projects are quite close to market. You should have some kind of ready tested prototype in a relevant environment. So it's most of the research is done, and this is the final push towards bringing it to market. But it could be a nice way to find funding for in this late phase of innovation. So, and this was my final message to you, and I hope you now have a little bit more an overview of other funding possibilities as well that can connect to this joint call between Sweden and France. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Annika, and I also work here at Vinnova. I'm very short presentation about another opportunity for collaboration between Sweden and France. This is a little bit not as much focused on smart mobility as such, but more on how transport has a part in the urban structure and how that can be more sustainable. So I work with this JPI Urban Europe, and I'll come back to what it is. But this presentation is about an upcoming call that's called Urban Accessibility and Connectivity. And this is an ERANET, so the information I present now is based on the application that was sent to the European Commission. And just 1 month ago or so, it was said that we could continue on working on the call. So this is not actually this is not the call text or such, but it's actually what we think that it will become at the end. So JPI Urban Europe is focusing more on urban issues than on transportation, but as you all know probably there is a strong link between these two. And Urban Europe says that it should be the knowledge hub for urban transitions, and of course sustainable mobility is an important part of such a transition. And JPI Urban Europe is a network also similar perhaps to Eureka. I'm not, so I don't know all the details about that, but it's 14 countries that are members, but then there are also many other associated countries. So so there's a mix of actors here as well. And it's all the way from research up to innovation. So the other things we've discussed today is very much focused on businesses. I would say that JPI Urban Europe is more focused on the mix of cities, companies, research, but also like public sector and also civil society. And if we go back to the upcoming call, it is said in the application that Enric aims at pooling resources from 16 countries to implement joint actions, including several joint calls for proposals in the area of urban mobility, accessibility and connectivity. And I'll come back a bit to what we mean with mobility, accessibility and connectivity. In this, the Enric or the participating countries in this are the ones that are yellow in this image, and as you can see, Sweden and France is participating, but there are many other countries as well. And as it has been in JPI Urban Europe before, a project needs to have two countries out of this. So it could be possible to have only Sweden and France, but I would say that in the best case in this, it's often that there are more countries as well. So regarding this Enric call then, the call budget is around 22 million euros. And that's then, I would say, as in all these cases, there are, of course, different countries has different amounts, but in total it's this, and that's also based then on, I think it's 25% or something from the European Commission. And there are several calls that are planned, and actually what is most relevant today is this the first call that will be launched in December this year. And that one will be focused both on research but also on innovation. So that will be two separate parts as it's planned today. And from France and Sweden, it's ANR. So it's actually the research council from France, but in Sweden we have Vinnova, Formas and the Swedish Energy Agency. So the idea from the Swedish side is that we will be able to finance actually everything from research up to innovation. So that's good to know as well. And we will cooperate a lot in doing this whole thing from the Swedish side. So so it's not always branded as Vinnova, but there will be our money as well. And just to give you an idea of what challenges this call will focus on, since we talked about smart mobility, this is not, the smartness is here as well, but it's not only the focus. So the first challenge is actually to have this overarching approach on sustainable urban physical mobility and transport and the link to land use and digital connectivity. So it's actually to get an image of what is this and have this as a all together with all different actors across Europe. The other one is how to focus on the implementation of innovative mobility. So that's all of that will be very much focused how to get from ideas to actually implementation. The third challenge is about how to transform and reorganize the urban space. Also, of course, then linked to urban mobility and accessibility, but that's very much around how things are designed in the city and what space is used for. The fourth challenge is about how to integrate transport, spatial and digital systems and to really make the best of the use of these opportunities when these are integrated. And then the fourth is then to, this is more related to policy options and what is needed in order to achieve a shift towards more sustainable and urban accessibility. So as you can see, it's a little bit different on a different focus, but still, I think this is a good, they complement each other a lot. you have any questions?
Thank you, Annika. No questions right now? No? We've had the first part of this meeting, which was lots of information about the calls, about different financing possibilities, about contact details. We will make these presentations available, and you will be able to get the email addresses and contact details should you need to ask any questions later on. And now, after the coffee break, we will hear some proposals for concrete projects about the ongoing projects in Sweden and about the companies that also are active in this area. So with this, we will start with Drive Sweden and international collaborations, and I would like to welcome Jan Hellåker.
There we go. Yep. So again, I'm Jan Hellåker. I'm the chairman of Drive Sweden. And why am I here? Well, it's because Drive Sweden, and I will tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. We are a major facilitating platform in the Swedish innovation system for mobility issues. So smart mobility is right up on our target. We are a strategic innovation program, which means that we are funded by Vinnova, the Swedish Energy Agency, and Formas. And our purpose in life is really to be that collaboration platform for open innovation in order to shape, design, and pilot the next generation mobility services for people and for goods, I should mention, and basing that on connected, automated, and shared vehicles. We don't specifically talk about electrifying vehicles here because that's kind of outside our scope, but that doesn't mean we don't believe in it. It's just that it hasn't been in our focus. When we started, we were a typical Swedish automotive R&D project. There were 17 partners signing the application some 5 years ago, and these were the usual suspects on the Swedish automotive scene. Since then, we've grown dramatically. So I think at last count, we are close to 120 partners. And the most interesting piece with that expansion is that it really exemplifies the breadth of this area. You can't design tomorrow's mobility service by being a car company or by being a city or by being Trafikverket. You need to collaborate between a number of different partners. And on this slide here, you see, of course, the government agencies up to your left, the vehicle manufacturers in the middle, the cities up to the right, researchers, and a lot of service providers at the bottom, and in the middle of all this feeding into the system, a lot of suppliers for software and hardware. And we even see actors like banks and insurance company coming into this because pretty much anyone in society will be affected if we manage to transition the way we move around in cities the way we hope they will. Another really interesting observation with this that about 1/3 of the partners here you see didn't exist when we started the program 4 years ago. They are startups, brand new startups. And I think that points to or speaks to the dynamic environment we're in this mobility landscape. Another observation which addresses what's happening here today, we also have in this slide 40% of the companies are headquartered outside of Sweden. In today's global economy, it's hard to tell which company is a Swedish company and which is not. Volvo is owned by China, the Volvo cars is owned by China and so forth. But if you look at who's headquartered somewhere else, 40% of the companies here are outside of Sweden. And I think that's the reason for that is primarily that they have been interested and attracted by the way we work. This is a typical Swedish triple helix system. Government, industry, and academia work in unison and in partnership. It's not the government telling the industry to do this or the researchers asking the industry to provide that, but this is all joined in, all done and agreed in collaboration. And again, we're a Swedish-French discussion here, and I think many of you have already seen that there are at least, I think, 4 or 5 French partners already as partners. I mentioned that we have a lot of vehicle manufacturers on board, but interestingly enough, we do not work on vehicles, but we're looking at a program on what other parameters need to be changed in order to change the way we move around. So these are the 5 themes that we are focusing our project activities on. Society planning, if we would move towards less people owning their own car, we can design our cities in a different way. We don't need as much parking spaces. Policy development, one example could be that in some people's wet dream is that everyone will be traveling in his own or her own driverless vehicle. That's going to kill societies, that's going to kill our cities. So we need to look at policies for how to sort of balance the availability of cheap, very convenient transportation in our cities with the mass capacity or high capacity mass transit networks. So that's being addressed as one issue in the policy development score. Business models may be the most dramatic difference for us as consumers. Clearly our vision is that no one is going to need to own his or her own car anymore, but we should be sharing that with other people and use public transportation for most of our travel. So essentially would like to do a Spotify on the transportation market. This change needs to involve the users, so public engagement is one very important part. And also, we need a digital infrastructure to support this, because connected vehicles and connected infrastructure need to be embedded, and that's another 5th element which will be needed. Oh, I thought I took that slide out, then you're going to see a few more that I had skipped. But again, mobility as a service is really where we would like to go. As far as the way we move around. Instead of owning a car, we should subscribe to mobility when we need it, as we need it, and at a fixed cost. I don't understand this. Well, my slides were thrown around here. So one example of a project is the Lima project, which really encompasses all of the parameters I mentioned here. No, it's not there. I was looking for some other slides there. Lindholmen is an area in Gothenburg where, which is now the location of most automotive activities in Sweden. Today, this morning, 24,000 people came in there, and all these people working from at anywhere between Volvo and Ericsson and Scania and others. Yes, Scania has a presence there as well. We ran out of parking spaces. At the same time, you have public transportation, which is okay, but many times you need a car during the day. So the Lima project is an attempt to offer a service to 1,000 employees working in this area to get more of a flexible way of commuting to work. You'll get the mobility as a service pass to public transportation. But if you took the bus to the work, then there's a chance to borrow someone else's car through our shared vehicles pool here, or go to the mobility hub and get some other solution for your transportation. And eventually we would like all of this to be controlled at the higher level, the systems level perspective of what does transportation look at in this area at this very moment. So I know that Stefan, who is the project manager for Ericsson here, will be afraid if I mentioned it, but we would like it to be that if we know that there's a big conference happening in Lindholmen, then we should raise the prices on parking spaces that morning and lower the prices on public transportation, all in order to balance the travel in and out of the area. And essentially the goal is to decrease the number of single occupancy vehicles coming into the area. So really exciting project. It will be in operation here towards the end of the year. Again, internationally, I mentioned that we are happy to have a lot of international partners, and we are starting to look increasingly at the international scene with what we do in all aspects of our project. And why do we do that? Well, through Vinnova, we have some pressure on us to export the Swedish innovation system. You think it's kind of unique, and it is. We've learned that in many of these efforts that not every country has the same approach, the same open approach. really allowing the government to sit with small companies in the same room and decide on projects. So that's the gospel we want to spread in the world. Clearly, we don't claim to know everything in Sweden, so we want to learn from the best outside of Sweden. We want to utilize international R&D funding at the European level or elsewhere. And also, one important part is that we want to help and promote our partners' export sales to, again, tell the world that we are pretty good at mobility in Sweden. So, all in all, we hope to promote sustainable mobility around the world so that whatever good things we have come up with in Sweden can be successfully exported to other countries. So where are we in this? Well, clearly, and this has been mentioned a lot this morning already, the EU framework is one important part of going international. Eureka was mentioned, ITA 3 was mentioned, and actually at this very moment, my colleague Sophie, who is the program director of Dry Sweden, is pitching this project at an ITA conference in Amsterdam. We would like to build on what we have done on digital infrastructure to offer a project on control tower for connected and automated vehicles. We think that's a very important area for the future when vehicles will become smarter. Silicon Valley, we have a couple of our members from Silicon Valley, small startup companies, but there through Vinnova support, we now have one person representing Dry Sweden and of course Vinnova to try to find the right set of partnerships in that very exciting environment in Silicon Valley. He's based at the Nordic Innovation House, and the picture you see there is a typical example of what happens in Palo Alto and the surrounding cities every evening. People get together, they never met before, and they walk away with a really good business idea. And that's the kind of happening that we would like to create in Sweden as well. So whatever we can bring back from that is very useful. Singapore has been singled out as another opportunity, and the reason for that is that Singapore probably has the most ambitious plan for how to transform mobility in the city. Clearly, it's more of a city than a country, so it's easier for them than for Sweden. But they have set their goals very high. They want to go automatic. They want to even further reduce the number of privately owned vehicles in the city. But they're lacking OEMs, so that's one thing that we can bring to them. And one thing we're looking at specifically with Singapore, as much as they claim to be, or they are a very smart city with a lot of open data, we've found out that they're not as willing to share data. So one topic for our extended collaboration with that will be launched at the ITS World Congress here in October is to build small partnerships between Swedish and Singaporean partners in order to leverage each other's data and build new smart services beyond that, using a neutral platform that we offer. And I won't go into detail of that platform because I think Ericsson will cover that in their presentation, but in the Dry Sweden Innovation Cloud, we have a mechanism that allows all partners to change data again at a neutral arena, which is really crucial to make partners open up. So this will be kicked off in October and hopefully continue in a number of projects throughout the following years. And of course, France, we're here. So that's really my last slide here. We're looking forward to the workshop this afternoon, in which we will start looking at what ideas could come up in this framework we heard about this morning. And just as a final announcement, next week we have the Dry Sweden Forum in Gothenburg. If you haven't signed up yet, it's not too late. And also, like a pre-announce that we're hoping to maybe as part of this event next year, or in this vicinity, or at the same time of the year, we hope to host the symposium, bilateral symposium on smart mobility between France and Sweden coming up next year. So with that, I finish and happy to take any questions.
No questions for Jan?
Then I'll hand over to Birger, who is going to...
Thank you very much, Jan. Yes, and while you mic up, I will introduce you Birger Löfgren from Research Institutes of Sweden, and he will talk about an establishment of an umbrella organization for French-Swedish collaboration. Welcome.
All right. Good. Thank you very much. Okay, so my name is Birger Lövgren. I work at RISE. We're a research institute in Sweden with offices throughout most of Sweden. In fact, also offices in Brest and Saint-Étienne in France. And I'm here to introduce a little bit of some of the thinking that we have had in order to deepen the collaboration in a project that we call the Umbrella. So for a couple of generations we have had the luxury of riding alone in our vehicles, and we know now that the future of mobility is shared, and in a not too distant future, in fact, without hands on the wheel, in order to increase the service level of the services, as well as at the same time as cutting the cost of the service. We know also that the ecosystem in the market is changing. The introduction of ride-hailing companies completely changed the way transit companies looked upon itself, and it changed the way people looked upon transit. And digitalization has proven to be able to introduce things like multimodal transportation, subscription-based mobility, and door-to-door bus services. We also know that the money flows in the market is starting to change. Not only by what we heard Janne talk about, that we have new actors coming into the market, but we also have conventional actors coming into the market of mobility, such as real estate companies, for example. And also you could see the broad interest from the broad sectors and completely new sectors in the collaboration in Drive Sweden, for example. We also know that international, national and local policies are developing to make use of and to benefit from the new mobility services. But we do know that policymakers and policy as such needs to be able to profit from the same natural learning cycle as everyone else does, of trying, failing, learning, and then trying again. And I think this is exactly what is happening in France and in Sweden and in between the two countries. Not only are two of the major transit companies in Sweden French, and one of the major truck company in France Swedish, and in fact all of the public road trials of self-driving vehicles in Sweden have been performed with French vehicles. On top of that, we have the Swedish Prime Minister sitting in Paris running vehicles in real time in Stockholm. And I think it's in the spirit of when the Prime Ministers met that, in fact, in May, before summer, a number of companies met to discuss how we can deepen the collaboration between French and Swedish companies and French and Swedish actors. So we met here in Stockholm in May, and we had a discussion on how we can do that. And we saw several values of how and several values of and reasons why we should meet and create this collaboration. For example, only for packaging the things that is already happening between Swedish and French companies and Swedish and French actors. but maybe most important, to create new projects and new collaborations and initiatives together. And lastly, they saw a value at their workshop also to find new ways of communicating to the broader public their agenda on more sustainable mobility development in society. They also put down, in this workshop, a number of goals/visions. And I will read some of them. People without access, they believe that people without access to cars in rural areas will be able to connect to each other and or commuter hubs within 30 minutes. Citizens can travel door to door feeling safe using shared mobility. A family experiences shared mobility as the preferred choice independent on disposable income. And lastly, a PTA will be able to have a sustainable business model for a self-driving bus line within 2 years. So these are the hills or the goals that the team at that time put down. So there are a number of things that I see that are important for the next step of development. It's not only the technical implementation, but of course also the practical use and the interface to people. I mentioned before policy, not only the regulations, but in fact the interpretation of the regulatory framework on a local and national level. And also safety, and not lastly, safety in and around vehicles, but also regarding cybersecurity. So the next steps for the Drive Sweden umbrella initiative project here is to arrange a number of roundtable discussions between these actors, explore these values. Also, we have in the pipe to have a specific gathering, an umbrella kick-off. Whether we do it in France or in Sweden, it's not decided yet, but we can discuss that also this afternoon. Hopefully, ambition is at least to have that before the end of the deadline of this first call. And Janne also mentioned the conference that we have a symposium around this time of the year next year to have a glimpse into some of the projects and some of the collaborations that have already started at that time. So I invite you, even though it was a little bit not announced very early, we took the opportunity to set up a short workshop this afternoon starting 12:30. And I know that a couple of you have already signed up to participate on that, to elaborate a little bit on setting the scene for this collaboration to make it worthwhile and as valuable as possible. So unless you have already signed up, doesn't matter. You are welcome to participate if you want anyway. So we meet 12:30 in these premises. Where is that, Katarina?
It's just actually these rooms behind.
All right. So you're most welcome to participate there. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Birger. Any questions for Birger so far?
Oh, there haven't been any questions yet.
I have a few mics here, so you can make your career in the movie. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Birger. So, we will continue with a few company presentations now, and the first out will be Jan Jansson from Keolis. Welcome, Jan. No? Okay. We lost Jan, maybe. No one else from Keolis is here feeling that they should speak? No. Okay, then we will take the next one, and I would like to welcome Erik Nordell from Ericsson. And okay, let me then find your presentations.
Okay. Ja. Bra, du vill börja. Yes, my name is Stefan Myberg from Ericsson. And
yes, and my name is Erik Nordell. I'm also from Ericsson, and I will start with the first part of this presentation. And we are representing two different parts of Ericsson, maybe we should mention as well. I'm working in the network development, the big business units within Ericsson with R&D.
yes, and I'm in the department for connected vehicles.
Yeah. So, Ericsson, we are already working quite a bit with this, with the connected transport. And of course, our main business is within networks and with not at least 5G, with its next generation of network that has started to roll out. Not that much in Europe, but in many other countries, especially in US and in China and in South Korea and so on. Why is this good? Because we believe that if we connect the transport sector, we can gain a lot. And of course, today we have the vehicles with steering wheel. We will have them for quite some time yet. But we think also that we can add new services if you have better connectivity compared to what we have today. But not that far away into the future, we will also have these self-driving vehicles where we think we can actually do really a lot with having them connected. We have some examples here as well that we already work quite a bit together between France and Sweden. For example, we have Navia and EasyMile that we are cooperating with. And if you look at the Swedish ones, we have Enric, a Swedish startup with trucks without any kind of steering wheel or anything. There are no driver in it. We have Volvo, and of course we have the other big Swedish heavy truck companies, Scania and Volvo, with us. We have been running tests, for example. We have been running in Kista, we've already seen that one, and we will do other trials in quite near future as well, and explore new possibilities. One of the things that we believe a lot in is these automated vehicles that run for themselves. But we also think that they actually need assistance from time to time. And by then, they need to be connected. Currently, we are looking mostly into commercial vehicles and where we can guarantee that you have a good 5G connectivity. And by then you are able to actually interact with the vehicle if you need to. I mean, 99% of the time we hope that the vehicle will run just by itself. But from time to time it will need assistance, and you can't just leave it stranded by a road or anything like that. There are also, of course, lots of other innovations coming out from this when we walk this path. And in this we also work a lot with academia and universities and so on. So what about 5G? 5G is, of course, it's a new infrastructure. It could sometimes be a bit difficult to really tell, okay, why 5G? Why is everyone talking 5G? It's just more of what we already have. 4G isn't that good enough. Well, actually, there are some very big differences between 4G and 5G. Not just that the capacity will be significantly higher, the latency for sending data and receiving data will be decreased and so on. But it's also that we can actually guarantee those kind of different characteristics in the system. So you can actually, you know that you will have the possibility to send a video or you can steer a car without actually getting glitches or anything like that. So the reliability is actually much higher. Of course, there are lots of other things as well, and I mean we can dig into the technology, but maybe is a different presentation. So, with that, I leave it to Stefan.
Yes, and Janne presented the Drive Sweden framework earlier. And in Drive Sweden, Ericsson is doing a lot of work. We are providing 5G to some of the test sites, but we are also providing a joint information hub, which we call the Drive Sweden Information Cloud, where Drive Sweden members and Drive Sweden projects can connect and share data with one another in any way. It could be just sharing data, or it could be mission critical services, or upload software, or build things together. So this is holding the project together in a digital way. And Janne has presented all of the partner and the setup around that. But the way we look upon it in kind of the digital strategy of Drive Sweden is that we want to connect a lot of things, obviously vehicles, partners, companies, and the transport infrastructure and other digital infrastructure needs to be connected. Then data and functionality needs to be shared. There are a lot of players in this who needs to connect to one another in a digital way. And once you do that, that's when you are really able to automate and also start using artificial intelligence. So in some way we are creating a digital twin of the reality, which we then can perform operations upon, and they will be reflected in reality. So that's kind of how we move from just connecting into actually using AI fully to the full extent. And with this digital platform, we believe that we have good possibilities to really start automating mobility, which probably means much more than just automating the driving. There's a lot of other things that can be automated on such a platform. So this is how we contribute to the project from our side, from the technology companies. We provide connectivity such as 5G. We provide innovation cloud for the digital cooperation. And then on top of this, Drive Sweden partners can run automated vehicles, transport services and everything. And to make this happen, obviously Drive Sweden has a lot of projects. There are test sites and there are demonstrations in daily life. So I will not go into detail, but some of these are some of the vehicles that have been in action so far. And as Janne mentioned, we are moving towards the goal of having mobility as a service concept rather than specific vehicles. And then in the innovation cloud, we are building more upon the digital infrastructure, the digital twin, and then connected services are coming not only from Ericsson but also from some of the key partners who are developing software and testing it jointly in the cloud. And some of the test sites we have in Stockholm, where we have a specific branch of the test site in Kista, where the Ericsson headquarters are. There is a specific test environment around KTH, the Royal Technology Institute of Technology. There is a test site in Gothenburg, and there is a specific test site called Asta Zero, which is more of a closed-off test track for vehicles to drive in a confined environment. And we are doing experiments with different types of vehicles, cars, shuttles, trucks, etc. And then also the international part of Drive Sweden, the Drive X part, will also be connected to the Innovation Cloud. And when you log into this as a member, you can log into the Innovation Cloud, you can see data, you can upload your own data and your own software. And if this was my own computer, I could show you more in detail. Then these things would be moving. These are the buses in Stockholm, pretty much in real time. This is a traffic light in real time, which has been a real challenge to get into this, but now we got it going on a few locations. And this is the Asta Zero test track, where we have one of the few 5G systems in action. And then from Ericsson's side, in the context of working together with France and with French companies, we have a lot of cooperation. For instance, with Transdev, where we are providing their own network. It's a private LTE network, we call it, in the city of Rouen, where Transdev is doing very advanced trials on connected and automated transport. So this is a really exciting development. We have other cooperation with Keolis, who are part of Drive Sweden, where we have been testing remote controlling vehicles, which is also an important part if you want to have truly driverless transport, when finally there is no driver in the vehicle, and sometimes someone needs to be responsible and drive from a remote location, which is then, as Birger showed, what the Swedish Prime Minister tried. He was in the Ericsson office in Paris and remote controlling this vehicle, which was in Stockholm, over 5G connectivity, and it worked quite well, I would say. So now we know that we can remotely operate vehicle even over a larger distance, and this is a nice start of continued cooperation between Sweden and France from our side. And yeah, that's it from us.
Any questions?
It's a day without questions.
Yeah, it's
right?
a very quiet audience.
Yeah.
Okay, or we are very sorry.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Please.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Dario, British Embassy in Stockholm. So I have a question concerning the actual applicability of smart driving solutions to the streets. What do you see as a timeline, and if you see any obstacles to the actual implementation of your solutions to the daily life of Sweden, for example? We hear a lot about, a lot of fuss about now they're coming, but what do you see, what sort of time frame you envision for the future?
Yeah,
should we?
I can start.
Okay.
I think, in private vehicles, if you buy a brand new private vehicle, an expensive one, you can get certain levels of semi-automated driving in certain car brands, but then you still have to be present in the vehicle and maybe hold your hand on the steering wheel, etc. That kind of automation is increasing gradually. And it's maybe not super relevant for a commercial company like a taxi, where you still have to pay the driver just sitting there looking at the steering wheel or something. So that's why we are in this context focusing more on commercial vehicles such as trucks and buses and machines, where there is a clear goal to have them fully automated and also driverless. And this is where we can contribute to the full extent on the connectivities, and that will also happen gradually. We see these first vehicles now in more confined areas, such as in mining and forest and airports and harbors. So that's why I think it, from an industrial perspective, it will be quite gradual. It has started in a very small context, and there will be more and more every year. But then there can be some big steps potentially if someone succeeds to launch mobility service in a big city, and then it takes off in a higher speed. But otherwise I think it's quite gradual. I would say. So where you can buy a semi-automated vehicle today, but you have to wait a couple of years for fully automated.
What I maybe could add, it's a very interesting question, because there are some other ingredients. For example, what we think, if you have a bus, an automated bus going, I mean, one of the things now is regulations. You actually need a driver. So, I mean, that need to be figured out exactly how those regulations will look like. Someone need to be responsible for the vehicle as it is, a human. Another thing is, of course, we believe if you have a good 5G connectivity, you could interact remotely with the vehicle, and you could possibly then have a driver, so to speak, someone responsible sitting in a central and assist whenever. For example, then local commuter buses could be used. You know the truck they are running, and you can actually guarantee there is a 5G connectivity there all the time. So if you have those ingredients in place, I mean, you need the vehicles, you need the 5G. The 5G actually, I mean, it could be deployed whenever. There are still, especially in Europe, there are lots of things, regulatory things happening in every country currently, actually, to figure out exactly how 5G will be deployed. So that's, of course, a hurdle. But everything will fall in place, and exactly when this happens is hard to say. And you maybe know, I mean, the automated vehicle, that's always something happening 2 years ahead, something like that. I mean, it has been prolonged several times, but I think lots of things is actually progressing very well. But exactly time, it's hard to say. The 5G networks could be deployed basically whenever, and the regulatory, it takes its time.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, Linda Mayby, Scania. I wonder, we're thinking a lot about remote control and whether that's actually usable from a psychological perspective, I would say, from usability perspective. Remote steering vehicles with the risk of emotional distancing from an operator, it would be potentially more easy to do a terrorist attack, etc., with remote controlling vehicles. Did you do some research on this when it comes to, obviously we have products which are quite dangerous in these situations.
Sure.
So we have to be a little bit more risk aware. Did you do research on the usability on remote controlling vehicles?
To divide it down, I mean, there is one part that is cybersecurity as such. You should not be able to hack it, and of course that's one of the things that we look a lot into. We do. Then of course there are another aspect, and that is actually if you are allowed to drive the vehicle, what do you do then? It's more like a driver today could also make a terrorist attack. So how do you deal with that? And I don't think we do anything in that area.
I don't think we have specifically dived into the remote control. We have done research about how people want to travel, to what extent they want to travel alone or in group and everything like that, and how they look upon risks with automation. But I don't think the remote control has been done enough research on, I would say. Exactly.
Yes, sure.
And I think it's possibly quite different if there's a cargo truck or if it's public transport, obviously. Different way to look upon remote control.
One thing also, I mean, this remote driving, it's something very visible. It's anyhow, it's quite simple to do those kind of presentations, those demos. But in the future, I mean, we believe that's a very, very rare situation. So, I mean, you maybe, if you have to assist a vehicle that has gone into trouble by some reason, usually you will take some decision for it, but you don't have a steering wheel sitting and steering. Am I allowed to do this or that? Because there are some rules that are interfering with each other for the vehicle, and you need to take a decision. There are lots of different things actually, not taking a remote steering wheel. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Erik and Stefan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And tack så mycket. And we will continue with the next speaker. I would like to welcome Christian Monstein from Transdev. Welcome.
Testing. Perfect. So, hello everyone. My name is Christian Monstein, and I'm head of innovation at Transdev Sweden. And first of all, a couple of words of Transdev, because I guess many of you have heard us as a company or as a brand, but I suspect that some haven't. And the reason of that is that we are a transport operator, and in our industry, it's name of the game to kind of be behind the public transport authority, and their brands are the ones that communicate it towards the end users, basically. But a couple of words about us. What is the purpose for us? What we do is basically that we empower people's freedom to move every day. And the reason why we do that is because moving is essential for people, basically to live, to work, to socialize, and basically most things you do. We, as a company, are owned by these two entities. The majority shares, 2/3, are held by Depo, which is a Friends, not public, but consignation investment fund that focuses on societal development, etc. And 1/3 by the German Racket Group, which is a private company. And for us, these are two really good parents, to be quite honest, because they are long-term. They have the focus on societal development, etc. So that's basically hand in hand with our purpose and our mission. In the world, we're a global company, obviously, quite a big one. I will not stick with the figures, but just to give you a scope. And obviously, the majority of all our employees, that's our traffic close staff, all our bus drivers, rail drivers, ferry hosts, etc., etc. And we're quite broad in terms of what we offer in modes. You could basically say that we do everything except transporting people up in the air, with one exception, because we have a cable car as well in Bogota, Colombia, that is connected to the public transport ecosystem as a part of the full journey there. But otherwise, we keep away from the air for obvious reasons. In Sweden, not nearly as many, but we're located, this almost looks like a demographical map of Sweden, but that's where we are located today. From Haparanda to Österlen, we used to say, so placed in the whole length of Sweden. And in Sweden, you saw the map with all the transport modes. In Sweden today, we operate with 4 different modes. And in approximately 2 months, hopefully we'll be able to add 2 autonomous shuttles to this list in the city of Linköping, where we have a part of a consortium called Elin, which I will get back to. This picture is important, I think, because basically our motto is that we are people serving people. If you think about what we really offer today, obviously a transport service, but we meet people. Our staff meet people. They are ambassadors of a service and they assist people along the way. And when we kind of look into the future and we talk about technology, both in terms of mechanical technology, autonomous vehicles, etc., or digitally with apps, mobility as a service systems, etc., where does this come into play? Let's keep that with us. So a bit more looking into the future. That was a bit where we are, who we are and where we are, but how do we perceive the future and what's our role in that? This picture tries to kind of explain how we see that the demands from the end users are changing, basically. And I know that the comparison to Netflix is a bit overly used in many different contexts, but what I find interesting might rather be that historically, perhaps you have benchmarked a service towards something that is quite near that service, a car versus other cars or similar. But what we can see is happening is that the demands from the end users are inspired by other services. So the Netflix comparison might be quite actual in this case, that the end users expect to have one plan, book, ticket app instead of having multiple different services to manage. On-demand stops instead of the traditional fixed bus stop, for instance. Real-time booking instead of us explaining what they can use and not use. And to have additional, more soft modes as a combination with the traditional trunk lines, the heavy lines, etc. Combining these kind of gives an interesting picture on the future, which we have chosen to define as PACE, our vision on how the future of mobility will look like and what we are striving towards. PACE meaning personalized, autonomous, connected, and electric and eco-friendly. And I thought I might quickly dive into these letters in connection to what we're actually here for today, to give you a brief on what we are working on and what we might find possible collaboration on. Personalized, in the industry often referred to as transport on demand, or TOD. The purpose here is to have it personalized instead of having the fixed timetables and the fixed bus stops in order to serve the end user on the end user's terms, where we have been quite active and actually, based what Birger said, try, fail, learn, actually did that a couple of times globally and launched a couple of services, both together with public entities but also commercially. Actually 2 times here in Sweden with our commercial operation to Arlanda Airport. Perhaps 3rd time's a charm, who knows. This is an obvious area of interest because it connects to the service, not so much depending on what actual vehicle type, but the service itself. The next part is autonomous vehicles, or autonomy in mobility. And you already saw one slide about the Rouen project, which is one of our bigger initiatives in terms of ambitions. But we actually also already have a few operations that are in live operation. Actually, the first one we started was in Rotterdam, 2005, so that's already 14 years. Obviously, it's a different kind of technology than we're looking on today. This one is run by magnetic pucks in the road and totally closed down from other infrastructure, but it has been running for quite some time and is daily transporting quite a lot of passengers between a parking lot and an industrial area in the Netherlands. Rouen was mentioned here before. And here in Sweden, we are preparing and are in the permit process. We have acquired vehicles from 2 of the French startup companies within the field, Navia and EasyMile, 1 of each. And are planning to launch them in Linköping this fall. And that we're doing together with quite a lot of partners, both locally and nationally, in this consortium called ELIN that I mentioned before. And I believe that we can find quite a lot of collaboration on that. We are collaborating already with a couple of other initiatives connected to EU funds, etc. And the point of this consortium is to have a research platform that is really transparent and open for new stakeholders who might want to perform their own research or test technology. The purpose of the platform is to invite such partners. The connected part, there are 2 perspectives of this. This focuses more on the end user perspective, but just also to mention, obviously, connecting our own resources, our vehicles, is a key component to produce mobility more effective and ensure quality in it. And we discussed during the break that some kind of aggregated layer on what data we already collect could be one further topic of interest to actually advance in fields like predictive maintenance, for instance, doing that smarter than we do today. But the other perspective is obviously also to connect the end user to provide a service that makes the end users access basically all mobility service that is provided in a region. The trick with this we learned because we have already launched a couple of MaaS services around the world. We are a main shareholder of the company MaaS Global, who holds the WIMAP, a Finnish company, a Dutch company called Transer, our fully held subsidiary Cityway that has created the Movisi app, etc., etc. My reflection around this is that it's basically not so much about an app. I think everyone would agree, but this is a good example of that. It's more a game of kind of a reversed supply-demand situation. You need to have a really good supply of mobility services to make this kind of offer attractive for an end user. If we expect people to get rid or sell their privately owned car, obviously there needs to be a supply that kind of complements that in a good way. And the potential is huge, but it's kind of a game of making that transition. And obviously also the business model between the partners involved, who owns the customers and how is that exchange done. And E stands for electric and eco-friendly. In the beginning it only stated electric, but obviously believe that development will continue, so who knows what the future holds. But the transition to electric vehicles is huge right now, and as it is today, we are the biggest operator with electric vehicles in Europe, first and foremost in the Netherlands. During next year we will increase our volume quite heavily in this field. And it is super interesting, and of course there are a lot of potential in this, but we also learn along the way that there are a couple of challenges, which leads to another possible topic for collaboration. I mean, electrifying buses in this case, if we focus on them, is I mean, there are different ways to do it. You can have fast charge buses that is charged along the route, but you can also have slow charge buses that is depot charged nighttime. And perhaps we will meet this challenge earlier in Sweden because we started to build our electric grid here like 10 years before the rest of the Europe generally, is the capacity of the electric grid. If we increase the volume of buses that are charged at depot, the peak of traveling ends, buses come to the depot, everyone sticks their cable into the grid, what happens? We have already today several cities in Sweden where we actually reached the roof of capacity in the electric grid. This is one main challenge if we want to further implement electric vehicles, obviously, which could be handled with energy storing in the depot or local energy production, etc. But anyway, we see that as a big topic of interest that we might find collaboration on. That's basically it for me. Any questions? Looking forward to further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you. And we are actually going to hear a presentation from Keolis after all. Warm welcome to Jan Jansson from Keolis. Right. We were a little bit ahead of schedule, which is good because then it's this way.
Okay. Oh, that's Turnstep. Maybe we should have Keolis instead. But it's very good because I will start with some similarities. There are a lot of similarities when we have this picture. Jan Jansson, we know. Okay, maybe I will start with Mr. Jansson, who am I. I've been working with this new mobilities now for 2.5 years. And I've been working on the Scandinavian and also a little bit in the Benelux market. So I was maybe a little bit late to enter this one, but I think I have coped up rather good, and I will show you some initiatives we do have with some of you in here. Interesting to know is that we are another of these French public transport operators, basically very similar in setup to Christian and Transdev. But we are owned by SNCF, the French railway, and Caisse de Dépôt et Placement de Québec, which is investment company for public investments in Canada. Of course, it is in Canada, French-speaking part of Canada. It's very interesting to see that I would say the biggest two operators in the world are French when it comes to public transport operators. On the other hand, when it comes to freight, we have the German operators. We have Schenker and DHL. Isn't that a little bit interesting? But now we will focus a little bit more on the French part, I would say, in these discussions today. So it's very good, Christian, that you went through all your transport modes, because we have pretty much the same, and I don't have them here today. But I will show you where we have operated and making trials with these vehicles. So it's rather, I would say, worldwide, but very much a focus in France. And the reason why is that we have a share in this Navia company, the shuttle company. Interesting, but when entering this, I saw the flower arrangement, and it said Nava. It's very close to Navia, so it's really the right situation in here, I would say. But a lot of experience we have been doing. We have been running in Lyon for almost 3 years now. So we have quite an experience of doing this. These are only the small shuttles so far, but of course we will expand to full-size buses. And when we can do that, then that is where we'll have the big business, of course. So this is a picture from Paris, La Défense in Paris, and this is a little bit about how many kilometers, how many hours. Not many kilometers, because these are slow movers so far. We want them to speed up. I mean, typically they're doing like 50, maybe 20 kilometers per hour, but we want them to speed at least 30, so they can cope with the traffic rhythm in a city. I think that's very important. Manufacturers are working with this part as well. 31 deployments. I think it's even. You could maybe add 1 or 2 today as well. So I didn't see the Ericsson presentation, but I will present a little bit about what we are doing in cooperation with Ericsson. And it's something we have done all these trials, running back and through 1 kilometer in a dedicated lane and with a safety driver on board. But it doesn't give us anything. It's very, very costly. We have to find resources, financials or fundings for all these things. So we have to take the next step. And occasionally, we could say, sometimes you're lucky with timing. Ericsson is launching their 5G systems for the moment. And we have found that connectivity is, to us, in a very strong belief, the way forward. Because connected vehicles can offer so much, and especially they can offer that we can transfer the driver from the vehicle to outside, possibly a control tower in the future. So that's why we are testing some ideas together with Ericsson. This is a stair. This is maybe PowerPoint 1995 or something like that, but that was when I started with PowerPoint, so I haven't really developed since that. But it's a content that is a very interesting thing here, because there are some different steps, because we really want to commercialize this product. We want full-size 12-meter buses to run without driver, and then you have to pass some different steps on the roadmap. I would say we are basically here somewhere. The vehicles start to talk to each other, vehicle-to-vehicle connection. We will see how we can connect the vehicles to a control tower together with Ericsson. And then, of course, tests will be run. We will have statements to the Swedish authorities like Transportstyrelsen, Swedish Transport Agency, and hopefully maybe not very far away in 22 or something like that. We could have some real runs without drivers in a bus, or maybe even earlier. It's up to us very much. It's up to us, and it's very much up to the manufacturers. So the manufacturers really have to cooperate, and I heard someone from Scania here. I think it's very, very important that we cooperate, because then we can do this faster, because we all have to prove that this is safe and for the authorities, and it's very, very important to have the player, the whole concept with manufacturers involved as well. Well, we have actually started, and this was the big UITP exhibition here in Stockholm, where we demonstrated abilities of remote control. Remote control is one step towards this automation, and what we did was actually from the exhibition center in Älvsjö, we had remote control of that vehicle there. We need one safety driver. This is a KTH vehicle, by the way. We need one safety driver, but they were two because it was a little bit, they had to wait a lot, so they want someone to speak. Interesting enough is that this is from inside the vehicle, so the driver sees, is like sitting there digitally and drive. And normally they could carry out this rather good. Not everyone, I would say, but most of them did. Interesting is that this is 5G. This screen is 5G, and that was typically like 30-35 milliseconds, or 40, Stefan, something there. Maximum. But this was a 4G screen. And there were some drivers just for fun trying to run the vehicle with a 4G screen. Didn't work at all because it's too late. That's very, very interesting. That's why we need 5G for all these situations. This was 15 kilometers away in Älvsjö, but you can do it from Paris, from Hyderabad, from wherever you want, so it's possible. So what does it bring, a connected system? I think this is really the core, how important it is with connectivity and 5G. Safety, if we ever want a zero vision, no no damage in traffic, then I would say connected cars are the way to do it. Connected vehicles are the way to do it. Because otherwise we cannot see around the corners. Now they are communicating and they are adapting speeds and things to directions to each other. Of course, there will be lower costs when we have commercialized this product. Typically, there is 50%. In the calculation for a bus setup, it's typically like 50% of the cost is for the driver. There's always losses in a system like this, but let's say we will get, 35-40% or something like that, which is really good. So this is a real driver to do something, to put this forward. Everything is electric, of course. So depots are interesting because depots, you can use this technology in depots. You save drivers, of course, you save accidents, but you also save area if you make it more efficient. It's like a warehouse, actually. If you make a warehouse more efficient, you will save space. And these depots are situated in the middle of the cities, actually. And you can imagine the value of the areas you can release doing other things, building houses or whatever. So this is really interesting. I also think that it will drive the introduction of digital systems for the society. It's very visual. This is very visual, and I think Ericsson needs also visualization of the 5G technology. There might be some, but I think there are very few people saying, look, there's a new 5G transmitter on the roof. But if they see a car, they will see, oh, it's connected, yeah, it's the new 5G, and things like that. So it's very important for visualization. We could also combine it then with on-demand for more rural or in off-peak areas. A bus, let's say after 7, 8 in 8 p.m. or something like that, will maybe in the outskirts of Stockholm or Gothenburg not have so many passengers. So there we could have an on-demand solution instead, a dedicated on-demand solution. Yes. Okay, this is Olof Johansson is not here, I suppose. No. But it's very much, this is in Swedish, but it's saying this is the Swedish Trafikverket stating, they had a big report, and the outcome was that they were stating that a connected road transport system will decrease the amount of CO2 and environment things, but also increase traffic safety. And this is, of course, very, very important that authorities are there as well. So, 2 ideas for use cases of autonomous buses. These are both these 2 we are actually working with. And the first one is Depo Management, which I mentioned before. A lot of it's very good also because you could do a lot of tests in a depot, and then you could have the learnings, and you can bring the learnings to the outside. Actually, you could build a control tower in a depot, and then you can transfer that control tower so all the vehicles outside as well. This one, of course, is not that far away at all. A full-size bus compared with a system of BRT. BRT, that is bus rapid transit, and it's basically dedicated bus lanes. So you could say this is in a city in the Netherlands, and it's basically a system with BRT. So it's basically a metro system, but it's on the earth. No inhabitants has more than 500 meters to a bus stop. This is a system where you can actually build a metro system, but on rubber wheels instead. So that is really interesting, and it's not very far away. Well, that was that one again, and now I had to be neutral. So there's a bus manufacturer from the west, and here we have the bus manufacturer from the east. So and you can use one of these or both of them, transfer them into that area. I will come back to that, to both these companies. We are actually discussing it. So this is a map of mobility in Kista. This is, I know that Nobina has been there before, and maybe you can recognize this lane. That was what Nobina was doing, but this time we will do it a little bit longer track. It will also be 5G powered, of course, with full connectivity. We have got some money for this together with Linköping, which you mentioned, Christian. We have won, you could say, the show project, and we have some dedicated resources money for this. The resources will be there in one and a half year or something like that. But we will start a little bit earlier in Kista anyway. So, and then I also would like, we have a lot of things ongoing in France. This is from Lyon. And this is from a small Swedish town somewhere. And a twin city concept would be very, very interesting to develop. So, thanks for now.
Thank you very much, Jan. Any questions for Jan?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Katarina Bostedt from Asta Zero. I wanted to ask, since you mentioned rural, what about 5G and the rural case? How do we address that? Are the people in the rural areas supposed to pay more for having a driver in that bus, or how is that going to
Well, be? Now you have to correct me, Ericsson guys, but I don't think we will. The first launch will not be in rural areas for 5G, and I'm not sure we will ever have 5G in some rural areas. But this is possible. You don't have that intense traffic. You have much more time to make a break and things like that. So you can do it with the existing 3G and 4G systems, really. That is my answer. Comments from Ericsson, maybe?
närmare.
You know? Okay. It was supposed to turn on. Okay, it's a tricky question, of course, and this is, of course, very much up to commercial forces. Will there be 5G everywhere? Hard to tell. In long time, I guess it will, but it might take a long time. That's for sure. So, and that it will start in real dense urban areas. That is, of course, for sure. So, how this progress will look like, I can't really tell. Very hard to tell.
Any other questions? I had one over there, and then we will take that one.
Hi, my name is Ying Zhang. I come from Huawei. So here I have a question related to how you handle the lobbies with the French's part, because usually this autonomous driving will reduce the workforce, the operation.
Yes.
And according to what we understand, in the many public transportation, so it's quite protected for the employment. So how you lobby the government to get approval would be great to know.
This is a very good question, and this is, let's say, the political part of what we are doing. We are making savings. We are making savings for our principles, but. Last year we had this in Sweden. We had this political week event in Almedalen, and I was called into a meeting because it was the union and the drivers were there, and they were stating, "Do you have any work tomorrow?" Yes, it's a little bit like this. This is a long-term transfer. This will take like 20-25 years since we are there, and we will have some drivers. And typically, you could take one driver and you put him in a control tower and he will manage like 4 or 5 different vehicles, something like that. So there will be some drivers left, but there will be a transition from the bus driver work and also the truck driver work, the taxi driver work. So this is something that society has to take care of. We can just announce what's ongoing, but it's a very slow process. And in history, you could see that it has been occupations that has really discontinued. So we can look back in history and see we are all clerks today. We were hard blue-collar workers for 70-80 years ago, but things are changing all the time. So that's my answer.
We have.
Okay. Yes.
I think one comment. I don't know so much, but I think you were asking about how to lobby in France, and my experience is in fact not France, but I can say something in Sweden regarding the permit process here. So my experience from all the permit processes that we have had for self-driving vehicles on public roads is that it's not so much about lobbying in Sweden at law, much more about, in fact, in the consortia wanting to set up the trials, being able to demonstrate that you handle all the risks and the safety around it. So much more focused on the actual showing that it's safe to run rather than lobbying activities. So that's my experience from Sweden.
Good, you answered it. There were the two questions actually. You answered that one. Perfect. Yeah. Now.
Hello, Lars from Nobina here. Christian from Transdev mentioned your vision of the next step for autonomous mobility. And I wonder, in 2 or 3 words, how is that from Keolis?
I would say that was what I presented. We want connected vehicles very, very soon, because we have to do we see that we have to take a step towards the commercialization. That is very, very important for us. Abilities for vehicles will, of course, increase all the time. So we will, of course, adapt, but if we can affect the development of the vehicles, working very close to the manufacturers, I think that's very important as well. Our wish is, of course, to release the resources with the driverless vehicle. Yeah.
Any other questions?
There's one.
Yes, just one question, because you're a French company working here in Sweden. What would be the main difference also between the French and the Swedish ecosystem in terms of partnership and the value that you can get here compared to France and vice versa?
Interesting. The French highbrows are looking very much to Sweden, because Sweden is very top technology when it comes to digitalization, for instance. I mean, everyone has a smartphone in Sweden these days. That is not the case in France. So the learnings from Sweden is very, very important, both when it comes from technology, but also from possible business cases. So we are developing a lot in France. Also, things are a little bit different in France. The mayor, for instance, is very, very strong person in French. He could put a stamp on something, and then you have approval to make some tests. That doesn't happen in Sweden, where you have the Swedish Transport Agency and things like that. Of course, there are some EU rules and things like that, but general point of view, looking into Scandinavia, I would say, because we are that far in digitalization and learn from the business processes. Then the relation between PTAs, public transport authorities in Sweden and in France are slightly different. You know, on top level in France, everyone is knowing each other because they have went in the same school. So yeah, that's a little bit how it works. Okay.
Okay. Any last question? One more?
Hello. Is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
Hello, Christian again from Transdev. Just as a complement to the perspective on drivers and the transition, because I mean, on one hand, it's quite obvious that there is differences in this context compared to other industries like manufacturing or dealing with luggage on Heathrow Airport, etc. There are closed down areas, and this is very much open space, even though we kind of try to disconnect it to advance in near time. And with that being said, and with our perspective of people serving people, it's quite interesting to understand what is the driver's role. And if we in near time, or first of all, no, I mean, it's a crystal ball. Who can actually claim when the big networks have been automated? At some point, possibly yes, but when? Personally, I think it's quite far ahead for the big systems. But the smaller vehicles that we've seen a lot of pictures on here, their purpose is to kind of complement the traditional systems, which leads to the conclusion that we might add more users into the system as we will need more drivers in the traditional system. So I think in near time it will be quite the opposite instead, which is a good thing and possibly a challenge, because it's, I mean, most places in Europe there is a lack of bus drivers, also rail drivers, but first and foremost bus drivers. And the industry in Sweden made an analysis claiming that we lack 7,000 bus drivers in the next few years. So this is also quite important to keep in mind what we're doing.
Really, every summer we have the same problems, you and I, with getting bus drivers, and of course it's a communication problem because we are talking about the future, and it's really the future. But for the coming years, definitely bus drivers. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. And that concludes our speaker panel for today. We have come to the end of this meeting, and I would like to thank all the speakers and all of you here to listen. And summary-wise, I realized when looking at the presentations that, of course, collaboration is already happening. We don't actually need agreements to have collaboration happening. Companies don't care actually about these agreements. They collaborate anyway, and they're global in any case. We just hope that this agreement and call that we are making will further enhance all those actions and strengthen the visions that you are already having, actually. I have noted down a few keywords also. Driverless came up often, 5G, connectivity, societal challenges, policies, French-Swedish love affair, wine and cheese. But I'm happy that that this area of smart mobility covers so many technical challenges and societal challenges and policy challenges, which makes it very interesting to work with, and that there are quite many visions, and above all there is no lack of challenges, so there is a lot to work with, and I really hope that we have heard a few companies, we have heard a few ideas for the projects and environments that work with from Drive Sweden, and we will also hear similar in France on 24th of September, and I really hope that we can take it from here and turn it into more action and more collaboration, and use this agreement to really do something useful and long term. With that said, I would like to end the live stream and to thank our web audience for watching us. Thank you very much.